In the midst of Spirit Airlines declaring bankruptcy and finally going out of business, we're seeing a lot of changes in the airline industry, particularly with which airline is going to snap up those customers. Some other changes that we're seeing in business operations is happening a lot with Klarna, as they're starting to change their prospecting list from short term small purchases to more of larger purchases for more higher ticket items. And then finally, to round things out, we have a little bit of information about the latest inflation report and how that's actually affecting us in terms of our career and pay growth as well the last few months. We're going to talk about all that with me, Niamki Buchanan, and my wonderful co-host Matt White on today's episode of Road to Riches. All right, everybody, welcome back to this episode of Road to Riches. We are recording this on May 20th, 2026, and it has been a pretty good week so far for the markets, I would say. They've been up most days, but we don't know how things are going to end up. On the topic of how things are going to end up, like you briefly mentioned earlier, we're finally starting to see how things are shaking up with our flights. Of course, everyone is, up in arms about how flights are so expensive given, the Iran war and gas prices and things like that. But in with Spirit closing down, it's making things a little bit worse because even the a lot of the cheaper tickets are no longer on the market. So, of course, the big question is who is going to be that next airline that steps in and takes over that discount airline market, or scoops up those individuals. Of course, there still are a couple of the cheaper discount airlines still operational. Frontier being the largest one, the first one that comes to mind. Personally, when I'm not flying American, I fly Frontier. I think it's a pretty good deal, to be quite honest with you. Although I have heard recently from people that flew Spirit over the last few months that the quality of Spirit Airlines had actually gone up a little bit. Regardless, of course, with the discount airlines, a pretty big thing is that they were doing either short leg flights or quick flights, things like that, that they were able to sell tickets for 50, 60, $70 a piece. And where they really made their money was on the add-ons that they nickel and dime you on, right? If you wanted to get what I think Spirit called it the big front seat, for example, if you wanted a little extra room, or every carry-on bag, they charge you more. And things like that. Their baggage fees are normally a little bit more than some of the larger major airlines. So with that in mind, our this is what our first article talks about a little bit more, right? Rival airlines are carving up Spirit's routes and airport slots. So I'm sure many of you know that the large airlines have designated terminals at the different airports, right? So for me, at DFW, Dallas Fort Worth Airport, American Airlines is the largest airliner that flies out of that airport. We also have a smaller airport, Love Field, where Southwest, another somewhat discount airline, not quite to the degree of Frontier and Spirit used to be, but people generally consider it to be a little bit cheaper given its operations. It basically owns, more for lack of a better term, of the Love Field Airport. So this article goes into some of those changes that we're seeing a little bit. Starts off with Spirit Airlines' demise earlier this month threatened to turn Atlantic City International Airport into a virtual ghost town. At the time of its collapse, the budget carrier represented 75% of the airport's passenger traffic. Then a competitor sailed in. The day before Spirit shut down, Atlantic City Airport Director Tim Kroll got on the phone with Airways, a rival budget player. Hours after Spirit called it quits, Breeze had agreed to fill nearly all of Spirit's routes there. And that's what we're going to start seeing a lot more. These smaller, regional, super regional budget airlines are going to start essentially carving up, chopping up Spirit's old territory. I don't think there was generally any overall or specialized territory in which Spirit could definitely say we carry this particular market or these few routes, but the ones where they still were heavily active are being bought out by these other budget airlines. I think this is also even a good opportunity for some of the larger air carriers to still come in and take some of Spirit's terminals and flight lines for a cheap price. Being able to expand their experience a little bit further. I mean, even when it comes to some of the smaller ones, for example, right? Since I talked about American earlier, I'll bring this back up. Matt, even though American is the major or the flagship, air carrier, they still do have many regional airliners under them. So you may get on, and I don't know this for sure, so I'm just halfway making this up, but you may get on an Alaskan flight, right? Alaskan Airlines, and they may be owned by American. So what, and I know a little bit about this more than most people because at one point I wanted to be a pilot. So those regional airlines are what are called feeder airlines for the major ones. So they often share a lot of the same planes, contracts, maintenance people, things like that. But especially for those pilots, they'll start at a regional or a smaller airline and then move up or get promoted into the major airline. And so they take that as an opportunity. And my point is that these smaller regional airlines that are under these flagship brands can come in and take Spirit's spot for a lot of these areas, and expand that product offering, that service offering to new markets, taking over more terminals. And the hope, of course, is that this larger volume that they're seeing will start to bring some of those prices a bit closer to where Spirit was initially. What are your thoughts on this topic, Matt?
Yeah. So I'm not a huge flyer, so I can't really speak much to that side of things. But I think that Spirit Airlines going down and declaring bankruptcy the way that they did, and rival airlines coming in and carving up their routes, and especially what you were saying about the smaller regional airlines coming in. Uh, from an economic standpoint, I think that this is a good thing. We talked about this before, where when the government was essentially in talks with Spirit Airlines about possible relief. Now, this would have been in the form of a loan, so not necessarily a bailout, but it would have still been, obviously tax dollars used as a loan. Um, uh, you, you know, uh, technically, like the PPP loans that we had in during COVID, that the Small Business Administration gave out. Nevertheless, those deals fell flat, and Spirit Airlines went bankrupt. And we were talking about how this would be a better thing for the market. This is ultimately how things ought to carry out. And when I hear about the Spirit Airlines thing, I actually totally agree with you on the regional airline front. These regional airlines now have an opportunity to come in and offer lower prices than what the so-called oligopolies. So your Frontier, your Alaskan, and your Southwest, and what have you, will charge. You have these regional airlines who maybe will charge a little bit less because they have lower costs and because they're a lot more mobile, as is the case with smaller companies. And what this whole thing reminded me of was actually 2008. Of course, you and I were it's still in second and third grade when it happened, but doing some research on it, of course, you had the bailouts that were highly recommended to the Obama administration by Paul Krugman, who was a massive Keynesian, borderline communist, but definitely a Keynesian economist. And his plea was essentially, let's bail out Chrysler, let's bail out Chrysler, let's bail out GM, so that way these people don't lose their jobs, because trillions of billions of dollars in government spending is better than all of these people losing their jobs and unemployment being super high temporarily. Uh, you know, it essentially it was a plea from from an emotional standpoint, pathos, if you will, that oh, we don't want these people to lose their jobs. Well, it's kind of the same thing here, where if let's just say that the government had agreed to bail them out like they did with Chrysler, and say, no, we're not going to let you fail. Well, we're going to see the exact same thing we saw in 2008 when we did that. Unemployment didn't even what U3 unemployment, which is what it is literally U-3, and that's the unemployment rate we use. It measures. It doesn't. It's not necessarily a full metric of employment, because it only measures the people who are. It only measures the people who are actively looking for a job, and the definitions behind that are quite dubious. But that level of unemployment didn't get below 8% until what that would have been 7 years later, in 2013, November of 2013. Well, 6 years later, in November of 2013. uh, 5. I can't do math right now. So 2008 happens, we bail these companies out, and then unemployment skyrockets and doesn't go below 8% until November of 2013. And it would have, if we had just let Chrysler and GM fail, maybe we would have seen an overall better vehicle market because of it. And the reason that that's related is because in this case, Spirit Airlines failed, and many various reasons why it failed. Of course, the Wall Street Journal is trying to say that it failed because of rising fuel costs and everything like that. That may be true. Another part of it could also very very believably be bad management, things like that. But whatever the case, it is historically been accurate, and I believe it's going to be accurate again, that when the government just lets a company fail, or when a company is allowed to fail, oftentimes the thing that the Keynesian economists tell us are going to happen if we let companies fail, which is, in this case, the quote unquote oligopoly is going to come in and raise the prices for everybody, not remembering that the supply and demand curve is still a thing. It still exists. It's going to make life hard for everyone. What they don't seem to understand is that these companies are also in competition with each other, and they also have to fight with the little guys who are also competing for airline seats. And so prices may actually get lower because a company was allowed to fail, because there's that much more competition in the market. Um, uh, in hindsight, uh, you I'm happy that the company was allowed to fail. Of course, nobody wants to see a company fail. Nobody is saying that, oh, we're happy that Spirit Airlines went down. No, no, no. I didn't say. What I said was, I'm happy that the government didn't come in and try to use taxpayer money to keep it from failing. Um, like it did in 2008 with Chrysler and GM. Uh, and then, like you said, the regional airlines are going to come in, and there's going to be continued competition, so that's good. Maybe we'll even see another firm come in and say, "Hey, there's the demand there, and there's demand there now, so let's go ahead and enter into the market."
Yeah, you said a lot of good stuff there, and there's a couple of things that I actually want to hit on because they're important to me to be said. So, regarding the Chrysler GM thing in '08, you didn't say it, but actually, part of the terms of that bailout was that they would allow Pontiac, who GM owned and was also failing, to actually go out of business. So it did take a couple years for them to officially ramp down Pontiac, but that was one of the requirements that the federal government put on them in order to bail out GM and by extension Chrysler as well. So that's one thing. Um, Secondly, oh there was something I should have taken notes. I don't remember the second thing. But of course you brought up Keynes, so I was cringing when you were talking about him.
Right.
And Keynes is actually somewhat related to the second thing that I was going to say, which is why I was focused on it. But anyway, we'll just go ahead and skip to the third. And this is actually going to be a decent segue into our second article because you mentioned how the prices for these airline tickets can actually now I remember. Okay. So yes, the things some of the things that Kane said, when a company goes out of business, then the oligopoly can come in and raise prices. That is possible, of course, but it's not really likely. And in this situation, it's extremely unlikely for it to happen in the first place. The reason why is because the what the media says is the driving factor of Spirit's collapse. They say, of course, it's rising fuel prices is not necessarily true. Spirit declared bankruptcy, I believe, 3 times in 2 years.
Mhm.
So they had been on a downhill for many years before they declared bankruptcy, right? Meaning that the rising fuel costs, which have generally only been a large concern the last approximately 6 to 9 months, was not the main contributing factor. It was other things such as, like you said, likely bad management. Also, we know that there were numerous complaints that had been going around for a long time. There's a reason why Spirit was called the budget airline, right? The cheap airline, and it's because the quality of their service was bad. Um, their people believed that their pilots were not that great, so the flights themselves were not necessarily fun or as safe as people perceived them. Or let me rephrase that. People perceive the flights to not be as safe as they actually were. Um,
Right.
Maintenance is extremely strict and regulated for commercial airliners. So if you're not going to go down unless both of the pilots have a heart attack, and then the autopilot system fails. So you're going to be fine. Flying is literally the safest method of travel, of commercial travel, um, for many reasons, by the way. But as we're saying, allowing these companies to fail, and this is going into the third thing I was going to say, is a very good thing that's often necessary because when these companies fail, um, the competition opens back up, right? On the supply and demand curve, um, there. I'm not going to get too heavy into the economic theory, but it's important that we do discuss this a little bit, right? When there is a gap, a deficit of supply, right? When there's a gap between the supply and the demand, this space in between is what we refer to as economic profit, right? So when there is the ability for economic profit, or potential for it, more companies will enter the market so long as there are low enough barriers to entry, which in the airline industry. Strangely enough, there are, despite the massive cost to get in, because of the model of major airline, super regional, regional airline, and local. Because of that model, a lot of the smaller companies are to some degree subsidized, right? Especially
Right.
with the number of local airports that major airliners don't fly into. So more companies would come in to fill the spot that Spirit left. Now, I can see that you can make the argument of well, if so many companies are rushing in to try and take over these terminals, take over these lines, then the airports slash cities that own them are they're gonna basically get into a bidding war where everybody's going left and right, trying to see
Right.
who's gonna pay the most amount for these terminals. That could in the short term raise prices for those lines, but they're going to amortize the price of the purchase of these lines over many years. So with that in mind, the companies that come in to take Spirit's spot are now going to be able to offer lower flight costs because of the economies of scale, despite the large upfront costs. They don't just offload everything at first and say, "Well, we spent say $100 million on buying Spirit's territory. We've got to make $100 million this first year. We're going to charge everybody $400,000 a ticket." Like that's not how this works.
Right.
So we would, because of the idea of economic profit paired with the low barriers to entry, see the competition increase and therefore lead to lower flight costs in the mid to long term. There's that. Um, and so now segueing into our second story, it still has that idea of economic profit because Klarna, who has been previously known with many of the other buy now pay later um, offers or companies, they've been known, of course, to let people finance one off, two off, short term purchases. Let's say you're buying a $300 pair of headphones off Amazon, right? And you don't want to pay for it all up front. Well, now you can. Well, that's where Klarna and Affirm and the others stepped in. Well, Klarna, having seen that there is economic profit, there we go, to be made with larger, longer term, big ticket purchases, they're now changing their operational structure a little bit. Klarna's shift toward long term, big ticket loans drives strong revenue. The Swedish buy now, pay later company said first quarter revenue jumped 44% to 1.01 billion. Klarna has become the go-to for buy now, pay later loans. Now the payments company is shifting focus towards new offerings that cater to big ticket purchases, and executives say the pivot is paying off. Going down here a little bit, strong quarterly results sent shares 16% higher to $15.88. Despite the gain, the stock has lost about two-thirds of its value over the past year. Both of those data points combined show a larger story for what is happening in the consumer market. Klarna's operational change, where they've now seen a 44% jump in their revenue by shifting towards big ticket items, is showing that consumers are either just all of a sudden now extremely happy to spend money that they previously didn't have on large items, or things have gotten so bad for the consumer that that now they have to finance using buy now pay later or alternative forms of finance, credit cards and things like that for these big ticket purchases. And Klarna has previously seen that now the shift is from those short-term purchases to the large ones. So not only are we financing large purchases, we're also spending less money on short-term small purchases uh, altogether, which is why their stock has declined so much over the last few years. Those two realities show a very bad thing for the market right now for the consumer, right? Because we're seeing that prices continue to rise in all areas. Inflation is still high, wages are still depressed. People are not succeeding as they used to. And with the everyday American struggle getting harder and harder, with prices getting higher and higher, we're now having to see changing consumer habits in order to afford the things that they normally need. So I think that this is an unfortunate sign of both the past, the present, and the future. And we can only hope that as our government makes better decisions, or we hope the government makes better decisions in the future, that things will get a little bit better for the individuals. Kevin Warsh has recently been confirmed and started his term as the new chair of the Federal Reserve. Hopefully, he'll be able to bring forth some monetary policy that will be a little bit more favorable for Americans, as well as hopefully with the midterms coming up for Congress and state representatives in November. Hopefully, with the turnover into a new Congress, then we'll see politicians also implement better or better fiscal policy, excuse me, to again make things a little bit better and more affordable for the average American.
Yeah, I definitely think that it. I definitely think that in terms of making things more affordable, Klarna's shift is definitely a hot take here, a step in the right direction. I was actually thinking about it a little bit when I read the article myself earlier, and hot take here. I think that this is a good thing. That what Klarna is offering is good in the world of credit. Now, I will preface that by saying I think that it's a little bit it's a little bit indicative of a couple of things. Uh, that Number one, that customers are either finding it too hard to purchase things outright, or number two, uh, they're buying things that they can't afford, so they use Klarna to do the whole buy now pay later mechanism, and it's an option for them. It's an option for them to use so they can purchase things that they really can't afford. Um, and so I will preface my point by saying that I don't. I think that there's good and bad here. With as far as the buy now pay later system, I'm a little bit on the fence because on one side things have gotten a little bit expensive, but on the other side, it's like people shouldn't get in the habit of purchasing things that they can't afford, and not talking about cars or houses. Of course, you're going to get a loan on a house. You're going to get a loan on a car. That's not what Klarna is for. Klarna is for if you want to buy a PlayStation, um, or something like that. Something that's a little, kind of expensive, but it's not to the point of like a car. Um, and you want to get a loan for it, right? Or not a car, but maybe like a trailer, and not just a a product that you can immediately consume. Um, so, or a really nice stroller that maybe costs a little bit too much, or something like that. You now have the option of buy now, pay later, and I'm kind of on the fence about that. I kind of agree with it. I kind of don't agree with it. Um, so I'll preface my point about what its position in the credit market is by saying all that. But as far as what it's doing to the credit market, I actually think that it's a good thing. Because what it's doing is offering competition to these high interest rates that credit card companies do charge uh, for their credit cards. For example, I have American Express, I have Capital One as well, and they're both tied as far they charge the maximum amount that they are legally allowed to in the state of Oklahoma, which is I believe 18%. They're both at 17.99% APR, and uh, that's very very high. And so and so you're like, well, why don't you just use a credit card? Well, that's kind of dangerous, because if you leave a balance on your credit card, you're paying 18% on that balance that you leave. Whereas with Klarna, it's not necessarily the same thing. I've I haven't you ever used Klarna myself, but I have seen it in action. I've seen a lot of material on it, or read a lot of material over Klarna, and their interest rates are a little bit lower. And so they're offering a challenge, and this goes, and you're right, this is an incredible segue from that first article. Speaking of competition, it challenges the status quo and saying, essentially telling the credit card companies, like, why is this standard that you can just charge these massive interest rates? Now, of course, on the credit card side, they're like, okay, well, um, for people with higher credit, maybe we don't charge those higher interest rates. But at the end of the day, it's unsecured. We don't even know if we're going to get paid back. And in the actually very high chance that people default on their credit card debt, we have absolutely no recourse to go get that money. And so that's their defense. And Klarna is saying, okay, well, we're going to try to leverage this a little bit better by using things like referrals. Klarna actually makes a lot of its money through referrals, and for example, you click pay now, buy now, pay later on an Amazon product. Well, they will receive a portion of the revenue from that product from Amazon, because their argument is they helped Amazon sell that item. And so Klarna is leveraging other things to try and compete in the credit market. And I think it's a good thing. I think that it offers a challenge, a real competitive advantage, and maybe it'll lead to lower credit card rates. That is, of course, the my hope here and my takeaway from the article. And but as far as what they're doing with big ticket loans, bring it on. Always, we could always use more competition and more markets. If they think they can compete in the larger markets, then by all means. But certainly in the smaller ticket items, once again, your PlayStations, your maybe your $400, $300 baby strollers, because for some odd reason those are super expensive. I'm not really sure why they're as expensive, but we seem to be asking ourselves that question a lot about a lot of things these days. Like, why are you so expensive? Um, but you know, things that this buy now pay later mechanism is used a lot for, and maybe even can be good for. Certainly in that industry, I think it's a good thing. I think it offers a competitive edge to Klarna, maybe, and it'll. I think in the end, it'll American Express and Capital One and Mastercard. I think they will be forced to at least offer lower interest rates to even uh, their higher credit score users, because of the option that people can just go to Klarna.
Yeah, I'm not so sold on that idea. I think there is some merit to that argument and that stance, but at the same time, I think that these companies, that is buy now pay later and credit card companies, I think they have slightly different niches, which is, for example, you like you said, you'll buy, a stroller or a PlayStation or something like that with Klarna. You're not necessarily, at least I hope, you're not necessarily, buying groceries. Like I'm not gonna put, a pound of ground beef and 3 apples, for example, on Klarna. I'm just gonna put that on the credit card. And
Mhm.
that's one thing, is that those smaller daily purchases pretty much will continue to go on a credit card. And then secondly, uh, hopefully, I know this doesn't happen with a lot of people, but with most people, according to the statistics, we're paying off the full balance, the full statement balance of the credit card every month. Versus with Klarna, they're offering no interest loans for up to 3, sometimes 6 months. So it's a slightly different business model that attracts slightly different people for those slightly different purchases. And so I think there's going to be some downward pressure placed on credit card companies, but not a whole lot.
Right.
Um,
Well,
until we, uh, yeah, go for it.
I also wanted to say real quick because maybe you were going into it, maybe you weren't. Like you said, like you were saying about the groceries. You can just put it on your credit card, and that's true. But my point is that the mechanic is still the same, though. So, say you do put your groceries on a credit card, or rather, say you do put your groceries on a Klarna card, because Klarna also does the whole, you can get a card from Klarna, and as they've expanded kind of into that market, and you put it on that rather than the credit card, and like you said, they're offering these zero interest loans for some time, and the mechanic is still the same. They're still, because if you left the balance on your Capital One card, for example, you're going to get charged in my case, that 18% interest rate. Whereas maybe with Klarna, it's like we just talked about, it's not going to be anything. Although I will say, again, to preface that, it gives people this wrong impression that they can just go buy things that they can't afford.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
and that's where, and like I said before, I'm on the fence whether or not this whole buy now pay later thing is even like a good thing, because on one side you're saying, okay, well, things have gotten a little bit expensive, maybe, but again, the good side is assuming responsibility, right? There's a lot of irresponsibility going around, and you certainly don't want to introduce new products. You certainly don't want to, at least endorse products that promote irresponsibility. And unfortunately, Klarna is one of those products where it utilizes the buy now pay later structure to incentivize, not just promote, but incentivize irresponsibility. Because, like you said, these long term loans where you can where zero interest for a certain amount of time. I get perhaps some financial break, but again, statistically speaking, that's not what we're seeing. We're not seeing this, oh, well, they just needed a financial break. No, we're seeing people legitimately not pay their grocery bills, legitimately not pay these balances that they have. And unfortunately, that's why Klarna is doing as well as they are. I mean, we just kind of went over a very, very consolidated version of their books, and Klarna is doing really, really well, and that's part of the reason why. And so, yeah, so sorry to cut you off, but that is one of the reasons why I'm not only on the fence about whether or not this is even a good thing, but also to say, like, the mechanic is still the same whether or not you put your groceries on Klarna.
yeah, yeah, completely right. I mean, at the end of the day, Klarna, just like a credit card, is simply a tool, right? And
Right.
tools can be used in good ways, they can be used in bad ways. It's just that This particular tool has very few good uses. It's very, very easy to fall into the trap that they want you to fall into, which of
Right.
course is to get so many of these micro loans that you forget about a couple of them, and then now you owe a late fee, and then you rack up a few late fees, and now you can't afford to pay the late fees, and now they hit you with the interest and all these other things, and then it
At the end of
becomes this death spiral basically.
at the end of the day, we have to promote responsibility.
Right.
I mean, we can't say it enough. You have to build yourself out a budget. You got to keep track of you got to keep track of it. You can use Klarna if you want, but you have to be sure that you're being responsible about it, because otherwise you could really dig yourself into a very large hole. And for some people, I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it. Some of these holes are insurmountable. People just burying themselves in debt, and they don't even know it until it's too late. And we just got to be responsible with it.
Yeah, I mean that's all it is. Like you said, it's just being responsible with it. We've seen so many people, or at least I have in the past. I don't watch them anymore, but on Dave Ramsey, where they come in and say, "Hey, Dave, I have $100,000 in credit card debt. What do I do?" And
Mhm.
of course, now for our generation, it's Caleb Hammer with Financial Audit. That's a great show in my opinion. I love watching it. But this is the same thing that we're seeing, where people don't pay attention to their finances and end up putting themselves in a position where they don't know what to do, and that's only becoming easier and easier to do every single year. Inflation right now has hit 3.8%. I think we briefly mentioned this last week but didn't get into it too much. And this is NBC is actually reporting that this is the first time that the inflation rate has been above the growth of wages. It says the pace of wage gains has been slowing over the past 2 years, which we've reported on previously as well. In November, wage growth continued to rise at a pace of almost 4%. April's jobs reports, which was released Friday, showed that wage growth had slowed to 3.6%, which again is lower than the 3.8% that inflation is at. Granted, this inflation number isn't the revised inflation number, which I believe is going to come out in about a week or two. We may or may not talk about that then, since we're talking about it now. But the fact of the matter remains, right? That even even accounting for the yearly adjustments that hopefully you get to your wages or your salary, inflation has now outpaced it. This entire talk of affordability has now come to the forefront and gotten so important, to the point where now, like we said, people are having to put purchases on Klarna. People are lapsing payments on their credit cards at higher rates. People are taking out other forms of private loans or seeking alternative financing for things that had not that they would previously not had to do. I think this is one of the main reasons why the last 5 to 10 years, hustle culture has become so prevalent, because our generation has been born, or that is matured into an economy that is consistently so bad and is getting even worse every single year, that we have no choice but to have our full-time job and then go deliver DoorDash on the weekends,
Right.
or to have a second job, slinging pizzas, or to get try when what was it called, the when drop shipping was a big thing a few years ago. People were doing that. People are starting YouTube channels and Twitch streams and things like this at an unprecedented rate. I mean, we're seeing, I mean, so many things that people are trying to do just to make it.
Right.
And this is the reason why.
Yeah, I think first of all, this story is again. the 3.8% higher than wage growth. Again, a lot of it has to do with the rising energy prices. So, and like you were alluding to earlier, which are very volatile, which is why the Fed doesn't necessarily look at the CPE. Um, it looks at another metric, or CPI. The news looks at the CPI and the Fed looks at the CPE, which is Consumer Price Index versus Consumer Price Expenditure, and so this, but on the face, this is not good. I think that um, I think that the Fed, especially with Kevin Warsh coming in, looking at this, even if it's revised down to, even if the CPE says 3%, they'll say, no, we're not going to lower interest rates. We can't. Inflation's at 3%. We're not going to do that. And to be honest, I don't know if I would necessarily blame them. As far as interest rates themselves go, I know a lot of people are saying that interest rates are high. They need to go down. This is why people aren't buying houses. This is, et cetera, et cetera. Historically speaking, interest rates have always been around between 5 and 7%. That's the normal level. Of course, during the Roaring Twenties, they were low, but if you study it economically, you'll notice that in 1925 there was from 1925, late 1924 to early 1925, all the way to Black Tuesday, there was a 4-year sort of bubble that happened, and of what we know as the Roaring Twenties. A lot of people don't know that the Roaring Twenties did not start at the beginning of 1920. The United States was actually going through kind of a recession in the early 1920s because of the end of World War One. And it only got better after the president at the time, who was President Warren Harding, forced the Federal Reserve, or greatly encouraged the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates to 7%. And him doing this allowed the businesses who were about to fail, and the businesses who could afford it to stay open, but they would have to maybe raise their prices a little bit, and stay open. And then we got the Fed, who just completely collapsed interest rates. We got this bubble for 4 years, and then Black Tuesday happened. Of course, 6 months before Black Tuesday, we had a little mini recession, but that's another story for another time. I mean, we see this again before the '08 crash. All of that to say that historically speaking, the safe zone for interest rates is between 5 and 7%. And the reason people aren't buying houses is not necessarily because of the interest rate. The reason people aren't buying houses is because the median house price in the United States is $410,000. And so, wages are being far outpaced by the prices of these, not luxury goods, but these high value goods in society. They're being far outpaced by the cost of cars, by the cost of appliances, whether it be washers and dryers to lawn care equipment, and then on the top end, houses. I mean, that's why people aren't buying houses. People can say, and I'll admit, there is the whole, oh, well, interest rates could be lower and we wouldn't spend so much on interest. Yeah, but also if houses weren't $410,000, that would lower your interest payment also. And there's also the argument of just how just how cheap should it be to offer the service of lending money. and why should the Federal Reserve have the power to essentially make that a free service, which they have done in the past, and they did it in 1925, and they did it again in 2005, which led to the 1929 and 2008 crashes. And so, uh, yeah, this is really sad news. I not only not only for inflation kind of getting higher due to things happening overseas, the Iranian conflict, which hopefully will come to a close sooner rather than later, but also that wage growth is not living up to is not on the up and up like it should be, or like a lot of us think it should be. Um, uh, we just have to look at this situation, and we just have to look at this situation and say, okay, well, we can be we can complain about it, of course, but also don't be discouraged. Don't allow yourself to look at a fact like this and be discouraged and say, okay, well, now there's no point in trying because I mean, everything is against me. Inflation is higher than wage growth now. I can't afford a house. Interest rates aren't falling. The world is against me. And even if it is true that the world is against you, please don't be discouraged. Um, it just means that we're going to have to, uh, like you were saying, Niamki, hustle that much more. Uh, I wish it wasn't true. It just is what it is. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but there's no other way to say it.
Yep. I think you've done a great job of talking on a lot of different things and summarizing up. I mean, I don't have anything to add. So in that case, I'll just go ahead and lead us out because I mean, I've been thinking about what to say for this intro, and um, to be quite candid with you, I think this is probably the most important thing or most reasonable thing I can say at this point. Some of us are hoping that airline prices get cheaper, as we talked about. Some of us are hoping that we can, even afford next month's rent. So the economy has been and always will be a mixed bag for people, no matter how good it looks like it's going, no matter how bad it's going to be going. And as you know, Matt, but I just want our viewers to know as well. You know, the great economist Thomas Sowell, he said there are no solutions; there are only trade-offs. So this is one of those things. There's always going to be an upside and always going to be a downside because again, there are only trade-offs. So with that in mind, yes, we do need to try our best to find the silver lining in those things that we can, and to do whatever it takes to make ends meet for ourselves and for our family, and for our futures, whether that's next month, next year, or for retirement. With that in mind, thank you everybody for watching this episode of Road to Riches. My name is Niamki Buchanan. And again, my co-host is Matt White here. New episodes come out every Thursday. And if you like this one, please remember to like and subscribe to the podcast. And we will see you next week.